On the 1st of February 1945, a Bulgarian politician was led towards a grave and a firing squad was gathered for him. He was the former Prime Minister of the country, and he had sent his nation technically into the war on the side of the Axis, a decision which would later lead to his execution. Bogdan Filov was taken to a cemetery and was stood by his future grave, and was then shot ruthlessly. He was a man who someone described as being someone who preferred making history to teaching it, but he was viewed as a terrible traitor and collaborator, and for this he paid the ultimate price. Bogdan Filov was born in April 1883, and he attended university to study archaeology, and he was very interested in history. He was considered one of the leading historians of Bulgaria at the time, and he wrote about finds from ancient lands and civilizations. He became the director of the National Archaeological Museum, and he continued to be devoted to his profession until he decided to make a name for himself in politics. In February 1940, he was appointed the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bulgaria and was a key ally of Tsar Boris III. At this time, the Second World War was ongoing across Europe, and the Axis were looking for further allies and friends inside of Eastern Europe. Bulgaria signed a non-aggression pact with the Axis, and they then joined the Tripartite Pact, allying themselves also with Fascist Italy and Imperial Japan, as well as the Nazis. But this agreement allowed Hitler to move his troops and soldiers through Bulgaria to launch attacks upon Yugoslavia and Greece. The German army moved throughout the country to do this, but despite being part of the Axis forces, Bulgaria was not a prominent player during the war, and they tried to stay out of the fighting as much as they could. Bogdan Filov's government brought in laws which were comparable to the Nuremberg laws in Germany, and they stripped Jews of their rights inside the lands. Also established was an executive body which began to investigate Jews, and many were deported to German extermination camps. Over 11,000 people perished because of these policies. But following the death of Tsar Boris, Filov was part of a regency council, which was established as the new Tsar, Simeon II, was underage, and he acted with others as the regent of Bulgaria, meaning he technically had the same powers as a king. As the war turned against the Germans following the Battle of Stalingrad and the Soviets pushed forwards, sending the Germans back towards their homelands, the Bulgarians decided to enter an armistice with the Soviet Union. With this, a new government came in, and Bogdan Filov and much of his government, as well as the Regency Council, were arrested. Filov was then sentenced to death by a People's Tribunal, along with 92 other members of government and public officials. The executions were ruthless, and they took place on the very evening after the death sentences had been passed. In the evening of the 1st of February 1945, Bogdan Filov and some of his allies were led out of a prison cell, and he was taken to a cemetery in Sofia. A huge mass grave had been dug around a bomb crater, which was itself very large, and the men in small groups were led towards the grave. On the edge of the grave stood a firing squad made up of members of the Bulgarian military and army, and they were armed with their rifles. Bogdan Filov was led into the grave, and he was told to stand still. Quickly the order to raise their rifles was given, and the firing squad took aim and then fired at the former Prime Minister of Bulgaria after the order to shoot was given. Bogdan Filov was seen as a terrible Second World War collaborator, and under his government, thousands of people were sent to the concentration camps, and they were slaughtered because of his orders and collaborations with the Germans. But in a cemetery inside the Bulgarian capital, his life came to a brutal end. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.